Hello listeners, and welcome to episode 5 of the Model Philosopher podcast. This episode, my conversation is with Jean-André, famously known as Jean-Bernard André or JBA Diorama on social media and in various other places. Jean has been making fantastic models, particularly dioramas, for a number of years, and I've interviewed him previously on the Sprue Cutters Union podcast with Will and Tracy, and his work has been featured in books from AK and others. He's a fantastic diorama maker, someone who really thinks about dioramas, what they mean and how they're made. And this time I wanted to talk to him specifically about colour. Before we get on to that interview though, I'd just like to thank our sponsor, Scale Model Challenge. Scale Model Challenge is by far my favourite modelling show in the calendar. It's a fantastic blend of an amazing competition with work from the best modellers from all over the world. Over 150 unique traders, mostly boutique businesses bringing you different and unusual things that you won't see anywhere else. And an incredible social side, which is very much fostered by Robert and the crew that runs Scale Model Challenge, which is like a big warm hug for everybody that goes. It's an incredible venue and altogether makes for, as I said, the best weekend in the modelling calendar. If you'd like to find out more about Scale Model Challenge, and I suggest you do it soon because it's only 3 months away and it does book up very quick, then go to scalemodelchallenge.com. That's scalemodelchallenge.com, or look up Scale Model Challenge on Facebook or on Instagram. I'd also like to thank our patrons for your continued support. Thank you to Lee, Warren, Eddie, Frank, Robert, Stephen, Christian, Carlos, Paul, Bruce, Shafe, Pascal, Philippe, James, John, Eric, Matt and Dennis. I really do appreciate you supporting the show as patrons of the Model Philosopher. Don't forget there's a transcript of this week's interview as well on the Model Philosopher page. That's modelphilosopher.com. But without further ado, let's hear from Jean now. Welcome to the Model Philosopher podcast, Jean-André. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Chris. It's a pleasure to be there.
Now, people might know your work on Instagram and Facebook as JBA Diorama or Jean-Bernard André or many of your other nom de plume, or some of them might even remember you from the old Armorama days as, I think, Nicholas Cabaret.
Yes.
We'll go back a bit there.
Actually, yes.
Now, for anyone that's been living under a rock and isn't looking at the kind of work they should be looking at, can you tell us what kind of work you make? I don't want to say models because I think it's a bit different from that, but why don't you describe it? What do you make?
What I make is small vignettes or dioramas. You know, I used to be doing some regular military dioramas, but I twisted them in many different ways. And since I've been moving house for about now 7 years, I don't have any place anymore to put some big dioramas in store. So I've been setting up to do something more like, like shadow boxes, except that I don't use any lights or anything. It's just dioramas, flat dioramas that I can put under 3D frames. This is mostly what I'm doing. So the range of what I'm doing is quite wide because it can go from still military dioramas to completely out of there stuff with some women usually, and that's it really. It's quite colorful. Try to be innovative in terms of using of colors and also some really weird balance. I try every time not to do the same thing as I've been doing before, even if I fail, like everyone, who tries to do that. But I'm doing my best about that.
It's funny you said they're flat dioramas because to me they're like 3D paintings, if you see what I mean.
Yes.
They're kind of like fine art painting made into 3 dimensions.
I try indeed to do that, and I'm also beginning to to cheat a bit with perspective and proportions. Just like if I was to model a room, which would be perhaps in a 135 scale, 135th, that would be about 10 centimeters long. When my frame just allows me to use only 4 centimeters, I will tend to compress. So, for instance, if you've got a chair and it would be 2 centimeters by 2 centimeters or 1 inch by 1 inch. Now it's 1 inch by 5 millimeters, you see. So I tend to squish a little bit things in order to gain a lot of place this way. But really, the reason why I'm doing that is the challenge first, but it's also a basic problem of lack of space. It's stupid, but it's the case.
It's interesting because it's almost like it's put a set regular constraint on you that it has to fit this frame, because you have a regular size of frame, right? It's nearly always the same size.
Yes, except that now it's new because I begin to work on with my own frames. Like for instance, I'm working on a big diorama which will be about 45 centimeters long, for 30 centimeter high. It will be also a sort of box, but I will have to do my own box. Donc, so that's why. No, because indeed I was, it was always the same size. It was 13 centimeters by 9 or 15 centimeters by 12. So it was always the same. The same proportion. So after a few years, it begins to be a bit boring, to be limited, only because I'm a bad woodworker and I don't like doing my own frames. But now I've been, passing that stage, and I'm now trying to do some things. Uh, I want the frame to be adapted to my ideas and not the ideas adapted to the frame. That's quite new what I'm doing. I also have my stepsister, which was actually a professional artist, who gave me a few advices here and there, and said the first thing you've got to do is to vary the size of your dioramas, because the eye, if you one day you exhibit them here or there, people will not focus on one except or another one. So she said I must really, really vary a lot. But she's right.
Actually, it's funny you say that, because when I'm laying out books, I do the same thing. I try to make each spread and each page look a bit different, because I do think people's mind's eye gets kind of lazy looking at the same layout of thing over and over again. It kind of it stops you focusing on it. So if you change it up all the time, it constantly wakes people up, I think, when they're looking at it. And I can imagine that with the dioramas. But at the same time, I was thinking, when you place a constraint on something, it forces you to be more creative in other ways sometimes, because the ability to change the size is taken away. So you have to be more and more inventive, I would have thought, in using the space you've got.
I think you're completely right. Right, yes. Indeed, you're completely right. So now when I've got, when begin to do a big diorama, and after 3 weeks I get bored, I take one of my frames, I'm doing the diorama, just like the last one was that. It was a girl in Roman ruins, bathing or something. And it was exactly that, I got the frame and say, okay, I'm doing something on 1 week time. And I did that one in 1 week time because I got the frame, the vague idea. So I put a bit of paper, 9 centimeters by 13. I began to draw, and my diorama was there. I agree with you, indeed. But so laziness in a way.
Working on a big one after working on the little ones must be like trying to build the Sagrada Familia. This sort of huge, never-ending task you have to put together.
And it is also the problem with the people that are building some really very big dioramas. Last time I went at WME, so 2 years ago, I've been seeing a few big dioramas that just didn't make any sense. Just for instance, a column of people just going in front of a locomotive which was, visibly working, on things that just didn't make any sense. And this is the issue. So it's a little bit off topic, but the difficulty with big dioramas is to stay focused on what you want to show, and still be able to make a world work. So I will try to do more and more big dioramas in boxes because of that, because that's a really big challenge, when it comes to the color management or just the idea. It's more complicated, definitely.
I think quite often dioramas work best when you have a simple idea and you really focus on it. You eliminate anything that isn't serving the idea, that isn't, essential to putting the story across. So yeah, I can imagine that the bigger the diorama, the more risk you have of irrelevant elements, things you don't really need. So I guess you have to make them work. You have to find a way for them to be part of it, and I guess that's more difficult in a way.
Yes, but for years I've been saying that indeed that everything which is not strictly meaningful or useful for the drama, you've got to wipe out. But I've got a good friend which lives in Kiev, and she's been she's only into very very tiny miniatures. I'm speaking to her a lot, but there's lots of bad things happening there, so it's always nice to speak with one which is deep inside it. And she also kind of influenced me when it comes to idea, and she's really good with doing some very very tiny things with lots of details and so that. And actually, it's funny that we should mention color later, because actually you can put a lot of things in a diorama that are only accessories. You can do that. But when it comes to the colors, you just don't have to make them shine the same way, you put, for instance, I don't know, 200 bottles, empty bottles on a diorama, but only 10 or 15 just at the middle of the diorama will shine and will show. And then, once the focus is just the creator, the people will be directed on the focus thanks to the light, then the eye can stay a lot longer on your scene because there are some details. It's like the Belgian painter Magritte. When you look at his paintings, there's no details. He's not a real painter. You just grab the idea, and then after you've got nothing else to see. I've been changed my mind a little bit about that. So now would tend to use on some things I'm doing, not all, more details, but using color, just to make the point first, and then after the eye can wander and can look at it.
You're someone that uses color incredibly effectively in your work, and you use a lot of strong color as well. Is color something you've always been conscious of in modeling?
That's a good one. What can I say about that? I think that my liking in colors came from the fact that I've been working with Games Workshop miniature for a few years, and I really like that. Games Workshop, they've got their blue Space Marines, their red, I don't know, their things, their things that they sell, and at one point I didn't want anymore to actually, it was quite a leftist idea, but I didn't want to model something that was branded. I thought that my imagination was just mine and just too wide to get it centered on something that has got a big trademark on it. There was something that wasn't me about this workshop, so I left that down. And I came back to my first love, which was indeed military modeling, but I didn't want to let down the colors. So after that, well, whenever I had the chance to use colors, I was using them. But to be honest, it took me years in order to about 20 years to be more or less satisfied with the way I'm doing. I'm using colors in my diorama. It was quite a gradual move. At first, I guess that I was using colors just like I would say all the rather good diorama makers, like I won't cite any name, but all the good military diorama makers know color because they are good modelers. But to try to put things in another way, it took me a lot of time. When you look at my first job on Armorama, for instance, my military job at the time, there's a bit of work on the colors, but it's still, it was painful, it's not very, very good. For instance, I always when the light comes from behind a person, that means that you may have a very, very light background, and the person will be dark because I don't have the word in English right now. But doing some strong lighting effects. It took me, I'm 54 today. I guess I began to succeed that when I was about 45. It's me 30 years trying to work on that. It's quite a long process.
I think color is something we don't tend to think about. I can think of a lot of modelers who use it very well that I've never really heard talk about color in specifically. They just kind of do it. It's like they have a natural understanding of it. But I think for a lot of us, it's a language you have to learn. For me, it certainly is, and I feel quite at sea sometimes. And unable to kind of get to grips with it. It's a very tricky thing to learn.
Yes, indeed. And then it's just not their priority. I guess that lots of modelers want to reproduce, historical reality. There was history in scale in a way, to tell their own historical stories. Because they also like telling stories. It's often always the same, but they like to tell their own stories. But colors doesn't come in the way. If they're good modelers, colors come, but it seldom happens.
Color is something I think modelers usually either think about it in two ways. They either try not to think about it at all and just follow the instructions and use the color callouts because they're not really too interested in it. They're more interested in the physical building of it and the form of it, which is fine. And then there are people who are very, very interested in color accuracy.
Yeah.
And so they don't like to deviate from what they perceive to be the correct color, which, is in itself a bizarre idea because, color depends so much on the light, what time of day it is, what time of year it is, and everything else. But anyway, they just want the color accuracy. So they don't want to deviate. And I think quite often it's that deviation used in an intelligent way, which makes color interesting.
Yes.
If you see what I mean, used in a purposeful way rather than just sort of, playing with it. So there aren't too many. I think it's more common in figure painting than it is, a lot more common actually. It definitely is in figure painting than it is in scale modeling to play with color. Do you think that's true? Or
yes, of course. Of course, it's true. But it's always the same thing, also in figure modeling, you've got lots of. It's another sport, I got some friends in figure modeling, but they tend to do the things that will work at shows. Because there's lots of money in figure painting, there's lots of money going on. You've got lots of professional painters and you've got, so they tend to point at some sort of ideal. And in the same way, I think that lots of more creativity indeed when it comes to paint, but it could be better, It's always the same tricks that they use, always the same color scheme. It's less square truth than it is with armor modeling, for instance. But there's still something like that. But there's some work on colors and creativity, a lot. I think a lot more actually in figure painting. But I would advise to every armor modeler, instead of just when they're doing dioramas, of course. If it's just to do a plane or a tank that we put on a shelf, no problem. You follow the instruction. You've got the right RAL number, and you apply the color. It's no problem. But when you're doing dioramas, why shouldn't they watch, one of their favorite movies like, I don't know, Fury, Band Brothers, and they just make a screenshot of the tanks when they come through, and they just, using the little eyedropper and look at the colors on the tanks and try to do the same, for instance, and they would see that the colors that they can see in Band Brothers of their tanks are not the one that they apply on their own tanks when they're doing dioramas, for instance.
The interesting thing is actually both things you mentioned, Band of Brothers and I think Fury as well, use filters on the camera to desaturate the color.
Absolutely.
To give it a more sort of documentary feel, particularly Band of Brothers. It's quite a brown filter on the, on the camera, and there's very few vibrant colors on it. So, even the films they're watching, they're deliberately tweaking the color for an effect. And yet no one would look at that and say, the colors are all wrong on that tank or whatever.
Yeah, it's funny.
Well, probably some people would, but...
Yeah, I agree with you. Band Brothers indeed use some filters on something, but when you look at one of my preferred movie, so war movies, is the film Red Line from Terrence Malick.
Yeah.
And
Mine too.
And the use of the color on the movie is really fantastic, you know. And there's no filters; it's just very well filmed. It just it just has some ambience, and I don't have to use this kind of tricks. But you know, the kind of tricks that Warner Brothers are using, you can have that in almost every series. You know, you can even from just a screenshot of the series to tell exactly the story. You know, when it's about very dark blue or something, it's going to be a police story, a little bit macabre or something. Well, well,
it's a bit like we're going to stray into films now, but it's a bit like music in films as well. Has become extremely manipulative in the last few years. The way it's sort of, particularly in big budget, blockbuster films, the way it swells up in emotive moments, and it basically leads the viewer by the nose through every film. And I think it's the same way color is used sometimes as well. But we're getting off topic. So, the Thin Red Line for me actually is a really good example of how people could bring more vibrancy into their military modeling, because some of the colors in that really pop. That green grass on the hill when they're assaulting the Japanese position at the top, it's so green. It's like emerald green.
Yeah, so you know that's a scene, you know, at one moment where we can see just a cargo ship in a lagoon. The guy, just this scene with just the big black smoke and the gray of the ship and the gray of the sea, it just sticks in the end, you know. And you don't have to use. Actually, perhaps it's this kind of image that I want to use to create, you know, some really strong images and using colors for that. And they don't have to be a purple or red or something, but just the whole scheme, you know, it has to work. You know, it's a way why you will remember one moment in a movie. It's also because of the color and the combination of different colors, you see.
That's a good example as well of why color is important in your modeling, but it doesn't have to be the thing that people notice, because if it's done well, it should, as you say with the diorama, it should support it without being obvious what it's doing. It's not the main focus, but it supports the focus.
Absolutely. Exactly. We couldn't say better.
How do you choose color?
Oh, that's quite simple, you know. I'm doing my own mixes of colors, you know. I don't need to have a lot of paints, and yet I just have them just right in front of me. I've been counting them just before I was waiting for you. I've got 140, you know, little acrylic pots, you know, mostly AK, but I've got also some scale 75, you know, and I don't need those, but it's actually such a pleasure, you know. I usually, you know, I just empty completely my desk, look at my paints, and I say, what will I use? And usually, I just take about 10, and I stick up to those 10. And at the end, perhaps that I will take, you know, I will change my mind, I just take another one. But it's just a matter of looking at my paints and what could fit, you know. And I really like that. And after I'm doing my own mixes, but it helped me, you know, to give the starting point.
More. It's a bit like your the dropper, but with your eye instead. You're looking at the bottle, thinking, "Yeah, a bit of that there."
Because it's important, because you know, if you like, I'm just having a look at my blues, but you can see that, for instance, I've got some turquoise blues that won't go well with some kind of reds or brown or something. I've got some more, you know, sky blue or something, which wouldn't be so great with turquoise, which wouldn't be so great with some sort of red and something. So it's the kind of thing that I try to do, just to sort of set up a starting base, you know, perhaps after adding other paints, but using perhaps 7 or 8 basic paints, and after that working on that. But I need to have those 140 paint pots in front of me in order to help me at first. This is the way I'm working, really.
It's funny, I mix most of my colours too, and I find the paints I've bought I go back to are the really bright ones. They're the ones, not to mix really, but just, I need to find a way to use that. Or the ones I use from the bottle are the really bright ones. Because they're very hard to mix, like your turquoise, a really good turquoise and stuff like that. It's not impossible, but sometimes it's easier just to pick a nice one and use it.
Oh, I totally agree with you. It's really helping, you know. I mean, a lot of paints, it helps. It's just pot like that. Even if, of course, you always empty the same pot. I've got a few. I've got some. Like everyone, I've got my my preferred kind of paints. Preferred shades. For instance, there's one AK which is called, I believe, tire black. Tire like a tire. On the pronounce it bad. But this one,
mine's on my desk, rubber black.
It really replaces black for me most of the time. I never use black. I never use white. I always use, tie black or something. Those kind of base colors.
Actually, they have a color called Tenebrous Grey,
You've got that,
and I use that instead of black, and that's really nice. That's got a sort of a reddish, brownish, greyish tone to it. That's great, much better instead of black.
But why I shouldn't advise anyone to use black? Because there's nothing blacker than black, which means that when you work on the diorama, and at one point you will need something which will be darker, and you always and you have been using your Tenebrous Grey or your tile black. You can still, in last resort to black. And this is why,
when you need a bit of shadow on your other black, you need something darker.
Because at the end you got that. And when black is not enough, you've got some blackest black paint. You perhaps I use some paint which is called the Musu Black, which is something I found on Amazon, which is a kind of Chinese or Japanese, I think, paint. I've got it somewhere, but it is some kind of black that just, reflects light, doesn't reflect anything. And it's also...
It eats light,
yeah, it's really good. I got it here. It's called, Musu Black. You can see it here. And it's really good because it's really so much more blacker than everything that you can find for modelers. So I'm using that, and it kind of helps me, especially, when I'm doing my little frames. You may notice that the frames themselves are really black compared to the scene that are inside, because I'm using this kind of black on the outside, because it helps all the false blacks to shine through in the scene. You see? But I would say when it comes to white or black, use them only on last resort. You've got some cream kind of paints for white, some pale, don't know what do we have here, grimy grays from AK. It's really good to use that, this kind of off-white, use off-white, use never white, because you might need it at one point. It's just the same with antibiotics, You don't have to use antibiotics when you just have a cold. You wait for you to be really sick to take antibiotics. It's exactly the same thing. So never to...
I always think of the scene in Spinal Tap where he's talking about the amps going up to 11. And he says, you're here, you're at 10, you're at 10, you're at 10, you're at 10. Where do you go? And it's like that with black and white. You're at 10, and you don't have a colour that goes to 11. So you have to turn it down to 8. And then save 10 for when you really need something to pop.
Exactly. This is why, and why you should always do in the most possible time your own mixes, Never use some real sky blue. Just tone them down. Because at one point you will need them. That's a recipe for success.
I've spoken about this before on Sprue Cutters Union, but another problem I see a lot with people with colour is that they don't think of colour in terms of a spectrum from the darkest through to the light. So when they paint something, it's quite often missing either enough bottom end on the shadow or enough top end on the light, and it's all in the kind of mid-range, and everything just sort of sinks and disappears, and there's no definition to anything. Do you think that's a common problem with military modelers particularly?
Yes, yes, perhaps, yes. I don't know, but I've got the idea of, when I was at WME, I believe that the dioramas I prefer on the stand, that I was judging, by the way, was the ones of Roger Hoekmans. I'm not always a fan of the subjects, but he's really good, I believe, with dark colors. I believe he's good with that, He really managed to make something. We were talking about Band Brothers or something, but he uses the shadows in an effective manner way. I believe, yes.
He's got quite a dark, desaturated kind of mood to everything he
Yeah,
does.
it works, but it works because it's good.
But he uses the highlights as well to make sure it doesn't just sort of go grey.
Exactly.
His darks are dark, aren't they? And his lights are light. Yeah.
Exactly. I thought he was really good. It was the only one we. I felt there was something there. It was good.
It's funny. He reminds me of Dutch Renaissance when they used to prime the canvas brown, and you get that sort of dark effect.
Oh,
That kind of, it comes through in his work as well. I don't know whether there's any influence there or whether it's coincidence or what, but it always makes me think
because he lives in
like
Holland,
Bruegel and stuff like
that made this
yeah.
something in Holland.
He might have never looked at a Renaissance painting, even at school. Don't show me. Don't show me.
This is the Dutch effect.
Yeah. Oh, we're danger there of straying into the Dutch school and the Norwegian school of paint and all that modelling crap. I think Marianne van Gils as well uses light, shade, and all the tones between really well. And I do think that the best modelers I can think of and the best diorama modelers are people who really understand that.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Indeed, I forgot about Marianne van Gils, but he's so over the top. I think that is both dioramas of Marianne van Gils shows really a great way of using color. Anyway, it's not that obvious because you also have to deal with about thousand people, miniature people. But the way is great is that when I use color, it really feels that I'm really working on it and I'm working on the color. But with him, it looks both accidental, completely natural, and completely excellent. You know what I mean? He just managed to create some kind of reality, not warped reality, just reality. It works, and he uses plenty of colors. There's something so natural about the way he uses colors. I like that.
He doesn't use it in a showy way, in a really obvious kind of look at me, look at my color kind of way. It's very subtle but very effective.
Exactly. Yes, I totally agree with that. I was thinking about another model, which one like. It is Lebanese modeler Imad Bouantoun. Okay. I think that first his dioramas are excellent. He's very entertaining with this scene and something. But every time he tries to really use something that will pop when it comes to the colors. Maybe it will be some blue house. Maybe it will be some golden dome or something. But he will really try at one point to focus the attention on something else than just a nice military scene. And I really like him because he's something fresh, He's not murky or dark or something. He's got something, a more brighter way of using colors than most military modelers that I know.
Now, you use color very effectively to focus the eye on what you want people to look at. That's something that's been particularly true on the frames you've done. Is that something that's developed over time? I mean, I can remember you kind of, the first time I can remember you really doing it was with I think it was Kalkin Goal diorama with the tank and with the crane.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. This one is the first successful diorama I did with using colors. I still remember. I went to the shop and I asked the Russian green modeling pot. They gave me some terrible green, like olive drab,
lime green.
Yeah, and they said, no, I use lime green. And said, no, I know I will take lime green. It's a bit that. Yes, I believe it's my first really successful work when it comes to correct lighting, but everything connected to lighting. Yes.
But that's something you've continued to develop, isn't it? I mean, you did one for the Models for Ukraine book as well with the bell from, was it Frankfurt Church? I can't remember. But that's a very interesting one because the ground is almost black, or at least it's ashes, dark ashes color. But then there's this huge pop in the middle.
Yeah.
So you're not afraid of a bit of contrast as well?
No, of course not. But it's the same thing, I must have empty my first spot of tire black with that one, because there's no black at all in it. There's only some very murky colors. But see what I was telling there are plenty of stones everywhere, and just at the middle you've got the tractor and the girl on it. And indeed, it was. This is what I was telling you earlier. You're doing a rather big diorama. It's not big, but then you focus on the girl, and then on the tractor, and then on the rest. It just makes some sort of pyramid. Of how can I say it? I don't use the big words, but the right words. But you see what I mean. You focus on one thing, and then on another thing, and etc. Yes, I thought it was my best regular 3D diorama. It was that one. Yeah. I'm very happy to have given you to your very successful book.
The Fordham masonry as well, it goes back to what you were saying earlier about having some interest, because although color wise it's almost like it's been sunk completely almost out of sight because it's so dark, once you take your eye away from the brighter elements and you look at it, there is lots of things there to see.
Yeah.
It's not like you thought, well, that's not really relevant, I'll just kind of half-arse it. I'll just put a bit of gravel on and say that's rubble or something. You've put as much effort into every single part of that diorama as you did into the main focus.
Of course.
But it's there for you to discover after you've discovered the main part.
Yes, of course. I spot every centimeter square, every millimeter square of my dioramas to just make it sure it is perfect. There's never something that I will, that I will pass. Every time I try to. Yes, I spend the same amount of time on some hidden. They are never hidden. I never model anything hidden because this is really useless. But something that can be noticeable by the person, I will model it at the same precise way as the main focus. There's no question about that. Because really, about creating those kind of focuses, it's almost at the 2 last hours of the work that the focus will really pop. Because before, it's a good example, that diorama with the bell, because once you've got the diorama, the scene completed, I noticed, for instance, that some of the stone were not dark enough. So you take your airbrush with a little bit of smoke kind of paint, and you just put it back. And it's just really the last time that you can really get it focused. Only the 3 last hours of building, there you can see it created just at the last moment. And that's really something that is. I will be doing a big diorama soon with some locomotives. I've got the 8 or 9 bits of locomotives ready in front of me, and the focus will be for the moment only because one of them is red, and 5 of them are green, and you've got 2 blues or something. So the focus will be on the red. But right now, I can tell you that there's no focus on that one because it doesn't shine enough. It will be when everything will be assembled, then I will take probably some Mr. Paint kind of, lacquers that I will begin, to just wash, make some bright washes on everything, and there it will pop up. But it will take me another 3 weeks to work because it's a big one. And it's only in my mind that I know that I will be able to do, and it's not visible right now on the scene. Because, it's really complicated to do, and you have to take risk at some point.
It sounds like these elements are like colours themselves, in that how they act and how effective they are is really only visible when they're in amongst their colleagues, if you see what I mean, the other parts of it. So, one colour might look one way on your palette, but put it next to another colour, it looks different. And with you, the trains, you put the red one next to another one, and then you'll know how much brighter it needs to be or what you need to do to it.
Exactly. I totally agree with you. It's not easy. It's not easy, but it's a part of the fun, When you begin to work with colors, it's something that you've got to build parallel with the scene, you've got to build your balance. So sometimes, you create your balance on a piece of paper, but when you begin to build the scene, you realize that your piece of paper is worth nothing. You can throw it into the dustbin. It doesn't work. So you've got to improvise another kind of balance. You've got to increase the size of the diorama and something, and then you begin to use color. And then you might notice, for instance, that some detail which has to be, for instance, bright red will be in the left corner, but it's wrong. It will show, everyone will have a look at that place. So it's no good. You've got to tone down and then to clear up and then to tone down again and something. It's endless, and it is really part of the fun. Working on color is just like working on contrast, and it's another sport in itself. And I will just add also two different things for diorama making that people don't think, I believe, enough of. It's the use of the metallic colors, which can make a difference. That's another dimension. Metallic, non-metallic. So of course, lots of painters now use, the figure painters use some non-metallic stuff, paints, way of painting. But I prefer still using metallics, because that gives another dimension to the diorama. And as a fourth dimension of the diorama, it's whether things will be glossy, matte, or semi-matte, or semi-gloss, or something. It's something which is absolutely essential, I think.
Yeah, I mean, texture is something I don't think people think about enough.
Yes.
But you can really add so much interest with just a difference, like you say, between gloss, semi-gloss, and matte.
Indeed.
Even on the same model or the same figure, or
Yeah. For instance, right now I'm working on locomotives that I get. So locomotives are painted usually in glossy colors, of course. But when they end up, being broken, so you got lots of rust that is coming in. So actually, I'm looking at what on my locomotives right now. Honestly, the paint is glossy, except where the places where the rust just ran down, where the paint just went off, where I use some pigments, that I stick with a small brush, it is dead matte, and it really works because you've got this contrast between the gloss and the matte. And it looks, yeah, I'm looking at it right now. It looks kind of realistic. I'm happy about the effect. Reasonably.
Yeah, there's elements to what we do in pursuing realism, which aren't obvious to the viewer, but the more than you add, then the more effective it is. And I think it's the same with the color. That, as I said earlier, it shouldn't be massively obvious what you're doing, but I mean, I think a lot of your dioramas, colors used very strongly to direct the gaze to one place or another, or to create a mood. But I'm not sure people looking, other than saying, "Oh, that's colourful," they don't really think too much about how you've done that with the colour, if you see what I mean. It's not too obvious how you've done it.
Yeah.
To the point where it's a distraction.
Yes. The color, indeed, you're right on that. Color must never be a distraction, because it can produce distraction, of course. If you put a red hen or a rooster or something in the middle of a diorama, people will look at it. It's always the same thing. So no, it's just a construction. You've got to think about the way you construct color in a diorama in the same way as you build it and you pile up elements over elements. It's the same way. It's just another way of thinking the same thing, I believe.
Are you procedural in the way you work, that you plan things as you go, and as you go you think, right, well, that's going to be that color, and then the next thing is that color, and then tweak it a bit at the end? Or are you someone who paints something, weathers it, and then thinks, well, it needs a bit more color, I'll go back and add some paint, or I'll add a bit? Is it something you constantly in flux, or something that you plan out?
Well, at first, usually when I start a diorama, I've got the color, I've got the plan, I've got everything ready in my head. The problem is that the image in my head is usually blurry, it's not very precise. So I know that I will need a bit of red wheel or something. And then, of course, it happens like an evidence. When I begin to work on it, and I know that I must use this color, and this element after that color. And at the end, I think that was my goal for years, and now I'm happy because I actually manage to do that is that the thing I have in my head will happen in the diorama. Exactly the same colors, everything, And you can use some app on your phone just to draw a scene that you've got in your head. Make a basic plan, but you can't do the same with the color. The color it stays in your head, and it has to stay in your head till the end.
But colours in your head are a bit like trying to grab smoke, aren't they? It's really hard to kind of, until you put it on, until you start playing around with it, it's hard to fully grasp it.
Yeah, but it's funny, but sometimes it's just only the colors and the scene comes after. I've been doing a diorama, which is located in Thailand, with some Buddha head in the water. This wasn't just colors at the beginning. I just wanted to create, same kind of lighting effect that you may have in Apocalypse Now, for instance. Those the sundown on the rice fields or something. I wanted this color. I must do something with those colors. And so of course the rest came after that. But more and more just color scheme. I want to work on some kind of colors. When it's been a long time that I did not work with blue, I want to work with blue. And blue is not the easiest color, I believe, to work. I prefer working on greens. Greens work well with some.
Yeah, I like greens. There's a lot of room in green to to change it. It's much harder with red or blue. Well, I suppose it's better with secondary colours, but particularly with green, you can add a little red, or you can make it more blue, more yellow, and there's so many different ways you can play with green. It makes me laugh when people say that they don't like doing Allied World War II tanks because they're all green. It's like green's the best colour to play with.
It's really funny because with green, you can put some shadows in green and the highlights in yellow, pure yellow, and people will think it's green. While when you want to do some kind of sunny late evening effect on some blue, it's really more complicated because if you just spray some yellow, it will look a little bit green or something. It's complicated, I'm currently working on an effect like that. Blue is complicated to work with if you want to create some interesting lighting effects. Red you can work quite well with, but blue is complicated. I always thought so.
The biggest problem with red is making it lighter. You can't really. You can maybe add a bit of yellow, but you can't ever put white in blue. That's for sure.
No,
not blue, sorry, red. You can't put white in red. You definitely can in blue. So I always find it difficult with red to go lighter without just using another pure red.
When it comes to get lighter with red, I use orange and yellow quite clearly. And when I've got, I've got really my strong point here. I've got some extra paints. I've got my luminous red from Mr. Paint, which is some kind of, fluorescent red, which is very good to make some very high highlights. I've got those kind of, this just like black and white. The fluorescent paints are the Death Star of modeling.
The nuclear option.
Exactly. So. Yes, actually with red, I'm using lots of oranges and yellows, actually. And especially some inks, the transparent inks. Allclad does them, Mr. Paint does them, and they're really good. You thin them, you've got to really thin them because it can lead to catastrophes. And you just, wash a bit over with the airbrush, and it really shines, it will work, really.
Do you think people are afraid of a bit of colour in modelling?
I just think it's not their priority. Afraid? No. Why should it be? It's. I don't know. Of course, it's really if you are doing I don't know some really complicated camo, like I don't know late war World War II German. And, using some lighting effects on something like that is really more difficult than to create some lighting effects on a Sherman, The more you've got some details, like sandbags on the tank or something, the more it's difficult, of course. It's another challenge, It's lots of dimensions to take into consideration, so I perfectly understand why they just don't want to get really too much bored with that, it's lots more work, and you risk of ruin your scene. But I'm losing lots of resin with my dioramas, so I've been ruining more than one diorama in my entire life, which means that now I take all the risk because I know what it is to ruin months of work. While perhaps regular diorama makers wouldn't take the risk, but I'm taking it because the whole idea of my dioramas is to take risk using chemicals. So that's it.
It's quite funny. I hear it quite a lot all the time. People get to a stage on their model and they're afraid to go further because they're worried about ruining it. And I never really understood it because you could just build another one.
Yeah, you build another one. And at the end, I prefer about one very good diorama than 9 which are not good, which take too much place in my home.
Do you think something that's occurred to me, and I'm probably going to get in trouble with a lot of listeners for this, so I'm going to encourage you to get in trouble with them as well.
I don't care.
Sometimes I feel with figure painters, the sort of the shock of the effect or the dramatism of the effect is more important to them than the purpose of the effect. I see color and light used really well by figure painters, but without a definite purpose. It's about the technique, not the result, if you see what I mean.
Yes, really, figure painters sometimes make me think of those guitarists, who just play endless solos. It's stupid. It's the drummers, one half an hour during break, and they show their abilities. But I strongly believe, because I begin to know a bit more of that the figure painters. There's just too much money for the own sake of the hobby into that. The famous painters, they sell their painted figures. They need to win shows, so of course they will display it. But also, I must also say that the professional painters I know, because I know at least one, he's working on two kinds because he's a real passionate. So he's got the stuff that he will just put on at shows to win medals and just to be able after that to sell his own stuff. And he's got also his own scenes, the things that he's doing for himself, for his enjoyment. But there's also all the part of the job he does, to say, oh, I'm the best, it's a real game at which one has the biggest one,
It just sometimes feels that they're technically brilliant, but there's no real emotion to it.
No, it's not their priority. Their priority is to win shows.
Like you say, as well, perhaps to customers to demonstrate their technique and their ability.
Yeah, completely. I was about to say that there's no much more art in figure painting than there is in diorama painting as well. I'm not sure, because last time when I went at WME 2 years ago, I was really astonished by some of the stuff which I found, which was very, very creative. And I honestly saw very, very little military dioramas that were anything like creative. But in the figure department, I saw perhaps a dozen of pieces that are still sticking in my head. I thought there was invention, there was there was creation, there was really something about them, something which was, the purpose was to do something which was beautiful, something a little bit magic. And I like that,
Yeah.
Perhaps this is also in my mind. When I'm doing dioramas, I want to do something a little bit magic. And they managed to do so.
I hate to say it, but I think, although a lot of people listening will say, well, so what? It's not supposed to have any. But I think a lot of the dioramas, the military modelling, is lacking that magic. It's lacking that surprise element as well. It's, it's very, very well done, but it's just that extra thing. It's not there.
This is why, the best, the really best, I could rate Per Olavlund, for instance, or Marine Vangelis that we've been telling about.
Absolutely, yeah.
Those ones are, they're my Evangelis, I think that this is latest or second to last. He's been doing something with a whale, and a boat or something. And he put the
Parolabs, yeah.
he put the fishes inside the sea. He'd been doing. I thought it was not very realistic, but I thought that it really brought something as a world to the. It was at first was not so obvious that he should have done that. But on second thought, I thought it was quite brilliant because it managed to make something that you would proudly put in a cabinet of curiosities, curiosities cabinet, something like a 19th century piece of art that you would be putting on the. I thought it was kind of brilliant in this way,
Although it wasn't realistic, it for me it was almost literary. It's almost like the image you would get in your head reading a page of Moby Dick or something.
Yes.
That it's not, like a photograph. It's more like, or even a copper plate in a book, an etching in a book of that scene. Like you say, it did look, there was something very 19th century about the style of it. But at the same time, it's fantastic.
Yes.
Really well done.
I thought it's perhaps his best, actually. I believe it's my preferred work of
I think so. Yeah.
I hope to see it next at SMC next October.
It's strange, but it's the same with yours. I find the further people move away from military things, the more interesting they become. But I don't mean like doing cars and things or tractors, but in sort of, like all your favorite ones of mine. I mean, obviously, you know very well that I like the womb and I like the ships you did, but the women you do in these scenes with the one reaching out for the animal in the museum, or the sort of animal analog, should I say, and the one the one with she's holding the planet and stuff like that. These are the ones that really grab me. They're the ones I find really original and really interesting.
Oh, thank you. I also think so, but that's it. I've been developing an interest for locomotives about 2 years, so I'm doing dioramas with locomotives too because they're funny and I can use colors with them because they are red, blue, green, and so on. This is I started to the reason why I'm doing that is that when I was about 20, I was doing some military dioramas, but I was living in a life that didn't go well with that. For instance, I was working as a rock journalist for a very left-wing magazine. So can you imagine? Oh yes, I'm working for a left-wing magazine and I'm sending Little Panzers. Cool,
they would just fire you. They'd hang you.
It wouldn't go with it, It's there was a contradiction into my own head about that. And then there was also a flash when I heard that Coppola didn't make Apocalypse Now for the Vietnam War. I didn't care about it. He did it because he got some problems with his wife or something. I thought it was absolutely brilliant because, most diorama makers, they put their own bit, history. No, me, I put my own history in history. And this is the reason why, I've been using some kind of some decor that everyone could relate to. For instance, I like Edwardian era. It's my preferred era when it comes to architecture or everything. Really a fan of that era. But I will put the own thing that I got in my mind in those kind of decor, It's the same thing, you've got some scene, which could be logical, but for me, which has a meaning. And this is because at one point I wanted to have some meaning, which was on my own meanings in my diorama. This is why I moved. But I could also, also doing military dioramas in this way. All depends in the way you organize the things.
It must be creatively, though, incredibly liberating to give up on kits and things like that. Just to start from a blank slate.
Oh, yes. Thank you, 3D printing. It liberated me. Really. No, seriously. I've got plenty of kits behind me that I will probably never buy, never build. But yes, it's you too.
Same.
Same. Yeah.
Oh, I've got much more than that.
Yeah, I've got a bit number. Yes, it is liberating. I want to build locomotives. I can build locomotives on my own, especially with boats. Especially with
Mm.
boats. With boats, for instance, my earlier boat dioramas, it took me about 3 or 4 months just to build the everything. Now, first, I can even do it at job if I'm really bored myself, and I can model a boat or something in less than 1 month. So I've been, you know, sparing time a lot by doing that. It's really liberating, yes, and it's also, uh, I don't have any left, to turn the barrels of the guns, for instance. While now with 3D
Yeah.
printing, you just get that, and there's no problem with that. And I really like that. Yes, it's liberating. Can do whatever I want. No problem. I can model virtually anything now.
I do find quite often when I look at this big wall of kits behind me, I mean, I like the subjects, but I go to, on the rare occasion I've actually got in a place to start something new, which is very rare because usually I overlap them so much. I never got a clean slate. But I just look at them and think, I can't really think of anything interesting to do with that. But I've got lots of ideas in my head which don't involve a kit, which I am really keen to do.
Actually, I also thought, I stopped building kits a long time ago, but every now and then I like taking a kit. For instance, I've been doing my zero diorama,
Mm.
just a zero ditched in the sea. Oh, it was really a pleasure to take a Tamiya kit, which is excellent. I got the PE kit, I got everything. I've been doing models. It's just like a no-brainer. It fits. Compared to the stuff that you model yourself, it fits, and well, yeah, it was quite interesting. But now even when I use, for instance, I will have another diorama with a plane on it. I've been using, a Soviet PO2. And the engine is apparent on this plane, So I've been remodeling in 3D, and I'm very happy to have been able to model that. The wings, when they are pierced by bullets, they are just shattered with the cloth just going here and there.
Mm.
And I've been able to model that. So I'm very happy to both mix my own work with the ICM kit.
Why do you think we make models? What is it about making these little things which appeals to us?
I don't know if I'm right, but I think that for a lot of boys, it's when we are playing with our little plastic soldiers when we were kids, and we keep on doing that. In a way, it's that. I believe that for a lot of men doing dioramas this way, and it's also because they really like history, and they want to create history with their hands on something that will be relevant for them. They want, to have something just like a screenshot of Band of Brothers permanently in front
Mm.
of them. I believe it's that. It's just a mix between their kids' games and the fact that they like history so much that they want to have a trace of it in front of them. I believe it's that. Don't believe I'm better or different in this way. Just I've been watching, but that's it.
Yeah, that's something I really want to get across a lot with this show because I've been accused of being pretentious doing the blog and this podcast. But I'm not saying that the way we talk about it or the things we talk about are better than someone who opens an Airfix kit, builds it, puts it on the shelf, does the next one. It's just different.
It's just
And I just wanted somewhere for
completely.
people to talk about these things. That's all.
Yeah, but it's a bit like in the Bible. It is say to those that was given few will be asked for them. But if they ask for a lot, we'll be asking even more for them. That means that for me, the diorama, there's more work involved into doing a diorama that if you just build a tank or a plane and put on a shelf, there's more work. And then you've got to just get beyond that. I think this is a bit the way, I believe, choosing the most difficult way of doing things because I not only I've been models, but I also, combine them with other things, other techniques in order to create scenes, which is, I believe, the most complicated thing you can do with models. But I want to do more than that. That's my way of thinking in this term. But there's nothing. There's no. people that are building tanks to put on their shelves. It's stupid to ask them to reconsider their view on painting and accuracies. No, it's just a different sport completely.
Yeah, that's not their hobby.
And the hobby is to have a collection of miniature, historical, mechanical items. And that's really fine by me.
Are you trying to say something with the things you model? Or is it just you get these images in your head and you want to make them?
I try to say things to myself. That really, I've got the chance that, no, I've got the luck that some people like my dioramas, but if there wasn't my website or social media, I would do the same things, no, I don't try to say anything. There's no politics in my dioramas, for instance. I don't think there are. No, I don't think there are. I should
none
think about it more.
that you put in anyway.
But perhaps they are, but it's not really conscious. My dioramas are a complete expression of myself. So since I'm rather politicized, even though I'm less mouthy than some about that, I suppose that it can be sometimes seen through, but it's not not really, I think.
All right. Is there anything else we should talk about before we finish?
No, we made the complete turn. What can we say?
All right. Well, thank you very much.
But thank you very much to you, Chris. It's been a pleasure.
I really enjoyed this talk. I hope you got as much from that interview as I did. As a scale modeller, I find that colour is something that other scale modelers don't tend to think about quite so much beyond the issue of accuracy. But it's certainly something that you can use as an element to add further interest or direct attention on your model. During the interview, we talked about films, and I think very much that a model is like a prop in a film. But in order to tell the story, the director chooses how to direct the audience's gaze in order to say what they want with the model, and colour can do that on a model, highlighting elements, making them more dramatic, making them less dramatic, adding a certain sense of realism or documentary sort of element to it by desaturating or by amping it up and making it hyper-real in a way. Certainly is something worth thinking about, not in terms of painting your panzer pink, but maybe of just turning up the dial a little bit on the saturation of colour just to increase interest, as I said, or direct the viewer's gaze. Next time is going to be an interview with Tua K, a figure painter who's going to give another insight on colour from a figure painter's perspective. During this interview, Jean and I had a few things to say about figure painters, and I think it's only fair that we hear from a figure painter next. So tune in next time on The Model Philosopher. Don't forget to check out themodelphilosopher.com and to support our patrons' Scale Model Challenge. That's scalemodelchallenge.com. And thank you again to all the patrons. Take care. See you next time.